You ever think about a company like your cell phone provider? I mean, they're processing millions, maybe billions of little events every single day. Every call, every text, every megabyte of data. So how on earth do they make sure your bill is 100% accurate? Well, it's not magic. It's a powerful gatekeeper, a kind of digital bouncer that checks every single transaction before it can even dream of becoming an invoice.
All right, so here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the absolute basics, the building blocks of this whole system, billable items. Then we'll talk about the blueprint that gives them their structure, the Billable Item Class. And finally, we're going to dive deep into the star of our show, the processing role. This is the system's ultimate quality control inspector. So before we can really understand how that gatekeeper works, we've got to know what it's inspecting in the first place, right? So let's break down the absolute foundation of this entire billing process.
Well, here's the secret. They don't try to swallow the ocean in one gulp. Nope. Instead, every single chargeable event, whether it's a data download, a movie you stream, or a software license, gets broken down into one tiny, standardized, totally manageable piece of data.
And that little piece of data? That's what we call a billable item. Think of it like a pre-invoice line item. It captures the who, what, when, and how much of a service right at the moment it happens. This is the raw, fundamental unit that holds all the juicy details needed for perfectly accurate billing.
Now, here's a really important point. A billable item isn't just one flat piece of info. It's actually a structured record. At its very core, you've got the mandatory main item. That's the basic facts of the transaction. But links to that, you can have all this other related data for things like taxes, payment info, or even just descriptive text that might show up on the bill later. It's all bundled together into one complete, understandable event.
Okay, so if you've got millions of these items flooding the system, how do you stop it from becoming total chaos? How does the system know what to expect for each different type of transaction? Well, that is the job of the Billable Item Class.
You can think of the billable item class as literally the blueprint. So if you're a software company, you might have one blueprint for your monthly license fees and a totally different one for your data storage usage. Each class defines the exact structure, the exact fields for that type of transaction, which ensures you have absolute consistency across the board.
And this right here, this slide, shows a really, really important safety feature. See, these blueprints aren't something you can just change on a whim. They have a very strict life cycle. You create a new one, you activate it for use, and if you need to change it, you have to work on a separate modified version. Now, this is a huge deal because it means you can never accidentally break the rules for transactions that are already being processed live. It's a fundamental control for the stability of the entire system.
All right, this is where it all starts to click. We have our little packets of data, the billable items. We have the blueprint that defines their structure, the Billable Item Class. Now, we need the inspector at the front gate to check every single one of them as they arrive.
And that is the processing rule. Let's go back to our analogy. If a billable item is a package showing up at a warehouse, and the billable item class is the label on the outside saying what should be in the package, then the processing rule is the inspector who actually opens the box, checks the contents, and makes the call, does it move on to the shipping department, or in our world, to billing.
In this table here, this basically shows the main commands you can give to our inspector. You can tell it, hey, just let everything through, no questions asked. Or you can go to the other extreme and say, set everything aside as raw data for a human to review. But the most powerful and common choice is usually Rule 2. This tells the system, let all the good packages through automatically. But if you find even one little thing wrong, set that package aside as raw data so a person can figure out what happened. And that raw data state just means it's parked, unprocessed, and it's not going anywhere near an invoice until it's fixed.
Okay, so all this theory is one thing, but seeing it in action is where it really clicks. So let's walk through a real-world scenario. So let's imagine a software as a service company. We'll call them Martex Corp. They bill customers based on usage, and for them, any little mistake on an invoice can seriously hurt customer trust. So getting that initial data right is absolutely mission critical. So first things first. Martex sets the high-level rule for their software usage data. And you can see it right here on the screen. They've chosen Upload Rule 2. They're telling the system right from the get-go to automatically quarantine any incoming usage records that have any kind of error. But wait a minute. How does the system even know what counts as an error? This isn't just some simple checkbox. As this slide shows, The real power comes from something called program enhancements. This is where developers can write their own custom code, their own business logic, often at a specific point in a process, like Event 05, to perform really deep validation. They can write code that asks things like, is this customer ID actually active? Or does this usage amount even make sense for their subscription plan? This is what makes the rule truly intelligent. So that custom code we were just talking about, it typically performs 3 really critical functions, kind of like a super fast 3-step quality control process for every single item that comes through the door. First, it checks. It validates all that incoming data against those custom business rules. Second, it can enrich the data, so it can automatically add missing information, like looking up a customer's contract number and stamping it right onto the record. And third, and this is the most important part, it can accept. If any of those checks fail, it rejects the item, stopping a bad transaction dead in its tracks before it can ever contaminate a billing run.
And this is what happens when an item fails. It's not just deleted or ignored. No, it's formally flagged with a very specific reason code. You can see one here, invoiced in ECC, accept. This creates a perfect, crystal clear audit trail for an operations team to come in, investigate, fix the root problem, and then reprocess the data correctly. So we've been deep in the technical details. Let's pull back up to 30,000 feet and ask the big question. Why does any of this matter so much to the business?
It really all boils down to 3 things: accuracy, automation, and integrity. These rules are the automated gatekeepers that turn what could be a messy fire hose of data into a clean, trustworthy stream ready for billing. And at the end of the day, they do 2 things every business on the planet cares about. They stop revenue from leaking out, and they protect the customer relationship by making sure the bills are right.
You know, there's a line from the source material that just sums up the power of this control perfectly. It's not just about flagging an error. It's about actively isolating it, moving it to a whole separate table. This ensures that all the downstream processes, like billing and invoicing, only ever have to work with high-quality, pre-validated data.
So the key takeaway here is this: a processing rule isn't just some technical setting buried in a menu. It's the absolute front line of your company's financial controls. It's the guardian of your data integrity, your revenue, and ultimately your customers' trust. So it's worth asking yourself, your billing is only as good as your rules. Are yours ready?